Hi, I appreciate your interest in this podcast and I hope you're doing well. Today I tested out the Grace language learning model, and it is a creation tool that I've worked on for a little while now. And essentially, it is as if you're asking New Wine itself, which is me, questions, and then I respond, but I respond with a PhD level response. But it always lines up with the doctrine that I share. If there are any tweaks or things like that, and questions about what's shared, if you're using the model, just submit a ticket on the left-hand side. Issues, I think, is what it's called, and I'll get the email. And it's easy to. It has recursive learning, so it improves every time. But from what I've looked at it so far, I mean, it's in the very high 90s as far as its accuracy. So today I asked it a question, and the question I asked was, is there any scientific, psychological, or any other kind of studies that have evidence of when people believe a construct, a virtual construct where it's their reality, right? And I'm going to go back and kind of go show you where I'm coming from. When Adam was told, commanded, do not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the distinction between the knowledge of the tree of good and evil, and then he did, he had to create a virtual construct, a vain imagination, and then he applied the fig leaf. The fig leaf was just a manifestation of what was already in his mind and in his heart. And so he believed that that was going to be real, right? That would protect him, even though his conscience was screaming at him. So that's kind of where I'm deriving this from and other things, but that's a good example to start with. So this was created by the language model, and it goes like this. I'm just going to read verbatim what it provided me. So the mind, and this podcast is going to be called Demolition Man and the Virtual Construct. The mind that builds its own prison and its own heaven. The grace truth first. Here is what this question is really pointing to. The religious mind. The religious mind has been has been building a virtual construct called guilty sinners striving to be accepted, and treating it as the most real thing in the universe. The purge conscience, Hebrews 9:14, is not behavior modification. It is a demolition of a false construct and the installation of the actual reality. The truth is in Jesus, what it says in, I think, Ephesians. It's an installation of the actual reality, which is you are already righteous, already accepted, already co-seated, Ephesians 2:6. Science didn't discover this. Paul already said it, but science now confirms the architecture of how it works. So let's go deep. The three verses, this is one of the things I said, to provide three verses that harmonize to support the answer biblically, aligning back to what I taught it as far as doctrine. Verse 1, Romans 12:2. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Rather than me hurt your ears with me, unless I don't really know the pronunciation, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce every single Greek word. I'll just say translated from the Greek to spare you pain. So I do know this word, and it's the word transformed, and in the Greek it's metamorpho, and the same root as metamorphosis, not cosmetic change, structural reorganization at the cellular level. So the caterpillar does not improve, it dissolves and rebuilds. Renewing, and that word means this in Greek, which does not simply mean new in time. Renewing does not simply mean new in time. Kainos is the root word, means renovated to its original specification. I think that's amazing. Restore to what it was always designed to be. This is not replacement, this is renovation back to blueprint. These are the words of the LLM. Conformed, I'm not going to say that word, to be pressed into a mold shaped by an external pattern. Oh, well, I'm going to have to say the word I feel led to. It's cis, oh man, this is why I don't want to say them. Schematizo. There you go. Schematizo. To be present to a mold, shaped by an external pattern, and the world system is a mold. Most people don't know they're inside it. So now it provides a pattern. This is the Old Testament pattern of the stone tablets, hearts of flesh. 2 Corinthians 3:3, Ezekiel 36:26. The stone tablet was an external construct, rules written outside you, imposed on your behavior. The heart of flesh is the internal renovation, the law of the Spirit written in you, not on you. The virtual construct of law consciousness is the stone tablet experience. The renewed mind is the fleshly heart, responsive, alive, and renovated. Renovated back, what? To the original design. So let's do a practical application. Your mind has been running a simulation, a predictive model built from shame narratives, religious conditioning, and fear-based theology. Paul says, stop letting that simulation be your operating reality. The renovation is the update when the conscience is purged. The simulation loses its source data. You cannot run a guilt program when the guilt signal has been permanently removed. The verse 2 example, 2 Corinthians 10:5. I thought this was so good. Casting down arguments and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. This is so, I think, misunderstood. From my experience, to share briefly, I would try to control my thoughts, right? And that's not really what it's saying here. And I will get into that. And I experienced a condition that was labeled to me as scrupulosity, like OCD pretty much. And it was so bad that I had to take a form of, man, dude, I'm old school, Zoloft. And to be honest, it really, and then you're inhibited by the drug, right? So I was like, man, this doesn't feel right, you know. Long story short, after 2 years, I got off of that, and the thing that was causing that OCD was gone, and I was free. And I came out from under the law, self-imposed law. All right, let's go into the etymology about arguments when it talks about casting down the arguments. So I'll read it again. Casting down arguments and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. Arguments. Logizomai, calculated reasoning, mental constructs, it actually says this, logical frameworks, not random thoughts, structured belief architectures, virtual worlds the mind has built and decided to live in. That's exactly what I've been talking about. Casting down. Catheruntes. To demolish. Tear down a fortified structure. This is not demolition language and not persuasion language. Interesting, huh? Knowledge or gnosis here, but the goal is epikenosis, full recognized revelatory knowledge that you've experienced because you've received revelation from the Creator through His Son. Hebrews 1. The virtual constructs are specifically blocked epikenosis. Are blocking the epikenosis. They are anti-revelation architecture. Amazing. I'm reminded of rebuilding the things I once destroyed in Galatians. Captivity. Ak malatizo. Yeah. To take prisoner of war, Paul is describing a military campaign against mental constructs. Isn't that amazing? So here's a pattern, and this pattern is something that it actually came up with. The Tower of Babel, Genesis 11, humanity's most dramatic virtual construct. A structure built entirely from human logismos, calculated reasoning about how to reach God on human terms. God didn't improve it, He demolished it. The Babel pattern is every religious mental framework that says if I do enough, build enough, perform well enough, I will reach acceptance. In that case, pretty sure that was a different motive. All right. And so grace demolishes the tower. It demolishes the tower. The purge conscience removes the need to even build it. Going to the root, the source, the catalyst, right? The kernel. Practical application. So the logismos, the mental constructs, are not abstract. They are neural networks. Now we're starting to get into the deep part. Some more deep part here. They are neural networks. Neuroscience calls them predictive processing frameworks. The brain, or brain's default system of building models of reality and then filtering all incoming data through those models of filter. A shame-based logismos filters every spiritual experience through. But am I really forgiven? But what about that thing I did? Paul says, take it prisoner. The cross already demolished the source of architecture. You are enforcing a verdict that already stands. And what I've seen for me is before, taking prisoner was based on I have to, I must, or whatever. Now it's based on identity. I don't want to. It's just a fleeting thought, type situation, and I go on. And it doesn't linger. It dissipates. I mean, it dissipates in seconds, minutes, hours, for sure by the next day. If it becomes, if it tries to grow, and that is probably the long time ago experience. Now I'm way past that. I'm not trying to boast. I'm just sharing that that's the progression. Okay, because I'm growing in the knowledge of who I am, and so I know what's important. I know what's real, and those. How do I? Well, Paul says it. He says, "When I was a child, I thought like a child. I taught. I spoke like a child. And when I became a man, I put these childish ways behind me. And a man is huios, and teknon is a child born under the law. Huios is a freed son. Okay, verse 3, Hebrews 9:14. How much more shall the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without spot to God, cleanse your conscience from dead works to serve the living God? Cleanse, purge, this is the etymology. Katharizo, to purge completely, to make entirely clean, to remove thoroughly, not reduce, not manage, purge. Conscience. Sunadices, sun with plus edo, to know, to perceive, to see, which equals co-knowledge. The conscience is the faculty of co-knowing with God. When it is defiled, you are co-knowing with a false construct instead of with the Father. I'm now reminded of Paul when he talks to the Galatians and the Corinthians. He talks about another gospel and another Christ. And those other gospels and other Christs are what? They are constructs of religion. Dead works, necron ergon, effort generated from a corpse system. Effort generated dead works from a corpse system. And I actually did a blog on what it's about to say. Works that come from guilt or fear or obligation. The old construct actually said this a long time ago. The old construct generating zombie behavior, the walking dead. But look at me, you don't want to be a Christian like me? Bro, you can get out from under the law, be free. Um, and those that are led by the Spirit are the sons of God. Okay. Serve la triuing. Oof. Priestly service, worship, devotion. So the goal of the purge is not behavioral control. It is restored co-knowledge that flows naturally into priestly life. And see, even as you hear that, you still think, well, I got to be like a priest. and, and, and if you read it again, it says the goal of a purge conscience is not behavior control. It's about who you are. It's about who you are. I was listening to a song today and the guy started cussing on it, and I've heard it before and all that. And usually I heard the clean version, and it just happened to be a unclean version. And I was just like, man, I don't want to hear it. Priestly life, you know. I'm not perfect with that all the time, but in that case, I'm like, man, I'm good, right? Nobody told me I had to do that. Religion didn't say, oh, you better not listen to that. No, I didn't want to. It says in Ephesians, it says, according to his good pleasure. And he puts his good pleasure in us, meaning that he wanted to do what he did according to his good pleasure. He puts the wanting, the will in us by revelation, by this purge conscience, by the completed work, finished work of Christ. All right, another pattern. This is the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, Leviticus 16, the shadow, towards a New Testament fulfillment. The high priest entered the Holy of Holies once per year with the blood of bulls and goats, which could never purge the conscience. Hebrews 10:4. They could manage external ritual contamination, but they could not touch the conscience, the co-knowing faculty. Christ's blood goes where animal blood never could. Why is that? Because he was and is a man, God in the flesh. So it goes where animal blood never could, into the architecture, the design of how you know yourself. The virtual construct of guilty, striving, not yet enough, lives in the conscience. The blood, his blood, purges it completely, absolutely, permanently. Practical application. Every guilt response, every shame spiral, every compulsive religious performance, these are outputs of an undefiled conscience simulation. Interesting, huh? The blood of Christ doesn't give you better coping strategies for the simulation. It terminates the program. The practical question is not, how do I manage my guilt? How do I deal with this? But, am I living from a purged conscience or from the old construct? Truly, that is the question. All right, we can get to some good stuff here. This has all been good, but it's good. So now, what science says and what it confirms rather than creates. So this is not like genuine, authentic, or more like novel stuff. This is confirmation. Predictive processing. Carl Fritzen and Andy Clark. The brain does not passively receive reality. It generates a model of expected reality and then filters sensory input to confirm that model. The technical term is predictive coding. Sounds like AI, doesn't it? Your brain is a prediction machine, constantly running a simulation and only updating when prediction error is significant enough to force revision. This means if your prior model is, I'm a guilty sinner who must earn acceptance, your brain will actively filter spiritual experiences to confirm that construct. So that's the reality, the virtual reality, and resist evidence that contradicts it. It reinforces it. You can hear 1,000 Grace sermons and your brain routes them through the old model. Or the Grace sermons are not really Grace sermons. This is not spiritual stubbornness. It is, but this is AI. It's an AI, man. All right, this is one of the 1% part that I have. This is spiritual. This is spiritual stubbornness because law has been put on them. That's why. But it also is this. This is neurobiology fulfilling its design. So that spiritual aspect is having a hardening effect or a pattern effect, pattern creating effect in the biology. Crazy. Metatonia, beyond mind, is not trying harder to believe differently. It is prediction error large. It is a prediction error large enough to force model replacement. The cross is that event. The purge conscience is the hardware that processes the new prior. All right. Constructive memory. Elizabeth Loftus and Frederick Bartlett. Memory is not a recording. It is a reconstruction. Rebuilt every time you access it, filtered through current emotional state and belief. It is a memory is not a recording. It is a reconstruction rebuilt every time you access it, filtered through current emotional state and belief. Very dynamic. It sounds like it's always in the now also. Every time you remember a sin, a failure, a moment of shame, your brain reconstructs it through the current model. Under guilt consciousness, every memory reconstruction reinforces condemnation because you're aware of the law. Being aware of the law is aware of what it's judging. And it's different having a purged conscience versus a seared conscience, right? We're talking about a purge, something that you didn't do. The virtual construct rewrites itself continuously in that case. So this is why no more remembrance of sin. Hebrews 10:17 is not just theological poetry. It is a cognitive reset directive. And God says, I no longer construct you through the lens of those failures. When the conscience is purged, you stop reconstructing yourself through that lens too. Cognitive dissonance. Leon Festinger. Festinger's landmark research showed that when belief and behavior conflict, humans modify that belief or the belief to match behavior, not the other way around. They modify the belief to match behavior, not the other way around. This is the mechanism of self-justification, rationalization, and the entire edifice of human self-deception and preservation, probably self-righteousness. But here's the grace inversion. Identity precedes behavior. When the conscious is purged and you know yourself as righteous, the cognitive dissonance runs the other direction. Sin begins to feel alien and not natural. Not because of law pressure, but because the simulation no longer has a host. As New Wine puts it, grace is the dunamis or the power, the dynamo, inherent power from God. Inherently dynamo, over and over and over, it generates itself. Continual power that makes sin. So grace is that power that makes sin obsolete. The dunamis power, not the threat that makes sin costly. Obsolete versus costly, right? Because if it's costly, that means I'm reckoning it. I'm keeping track of it. If it's obsolete, then my identity is not tied to reckoning it or keeping track of it. Good stuff. Jungian shadow and the old man. Palios and anthropos. Anthropic, huh? Carl Jung identified the shadow, the unconscious repository of everything that the ego has rejected, suppressed, or deemed unacceptable. For most religious people, the shadow is enormous. every unspiritual impulse crammed into the unconscious because the law construct demands its rejection. Paul's Palios Anthropos, the old man, was crucified, aorist tense, which means a completed action, Romans 6:6, not suppressed, not managed, not put on a diet, crucified. The Jungian integration Christ achieves is not the gradual acceptance of the shadow. It is the death of the construct that created the shadow and resurrection into a new integrated self where the old fracture no longer exists. You may hear its echoes, you may hear its whispers, but they are far fleeting, dissipating, and fading away. But for the most part, you are a new creation, right? The old man is obsolete. Is an obsolete neural network, a pre-Christ identity construct still generating outputs, like I just said, in people who haven't received the epigenosis of its termination. Isn't that amazing? All right. Let's see here. So, next one is observer effect and quantum measurement. So, in quantum mechanics, this is that part of the LLM that can pull those white papers, and then it will use its reasoning to explain it according to how I've taught it. In quantum mechanics, the wave function of a particle exists in superposition, multiple potential states simultaneously, all at the same time, until it's observed. The act of observation collapses the wave function into one definite state. So New Wine teaches this as a parable of grace in the physical realm. Your identity in Christ exists as complete, righteous, whole. It is a definite state. But under law consciousness, the observer is a defiled conscience, and what it collapses the wave function into is always guilty, striving, and not yet. The purge conscience changes who is doing the observing. Now, you observe through co-knowledge with God. Paul says, nevertheless I live, but Christ liveth in me. Now you observe through yourself with co-knowledge with God. And what collapses into reality is righteousness, beloved, complete, same person, different observer, entirely different manifest reality. Bayesian inference, prior belief update. So Bayes' theorem, your current belief posterior equals prior belief updated by new evidence. Prior, I'm a sinner who must earn righteousness. Religious conditioning, shame narratives, generational theology. This prior is deeply embedded. Evidence, the finished work of Christ, 2 Corinthians 5:21. He who knew no sin became sin that we might become the righteousness of God. Bayesian update. When the evidence is perfect and complete, the posterior collapses. The old prior has zero explanatory power. This is metonia, not trying harder to believe, but a total posterior replacement effected by the quality of the evidence. The problem? Most people receive the evidence through a defiled conscience, which means the likelihood function is still filtered by the old prior. The purge conscience allows the evidence to land with its full weight. P, this is a little calculation I made. P, in parentheses, old identity, pipe, the cross, equals essentially 0. The math was always this way. I don't know if that's called trying to be cute or what. Epigenosis is when you recognize it. Okay, so let me touch on that briefly. So that kind of earlier where we were talking about gnosis is irrational, is knowledge, and epigenosis is biblically it is the revelatory knowledge received and then an experience is created. Essentially, it becomes you and your essence, because before that it was faith. right? And faith comes by hearing and hearing the word. So that faith comes in you. Then it says, by faith we have understanding that the worlds were created. By faith we have understanding. So now I have understanding. I have this understanding. I have an experience with this revelation, this faith. And that experience is what? Epikenosis. Now that epikenosis, I don't have faith anymore. Why? Because now I know. Why? Because I have knowledge. The experience created a knowing knowledge now. All right. Synthesis. One unified revelation. Here is the thread. Romans 12:2 says the virtual construct, schematizo, the mold of this world, is real. And the renovation, anakanos, kenosis, or kanos, is the structural return to the original design. Romans 12:2 says the virtual construct, the mold of this world, is real, and the renovation is the return, structural return by revelation and grace to the eternal design, original design. And it's eternal too. 2 Corinthians 10:5 names the construct precisely, logismus or mos, fortified mental architectures, and prescribes demolition, not management. It's also real. Demolition. It's a realization that there's already a demolition, or has been a demolition, and keeping it demolished because you want to, because it's not who you are, because you're not reckoning it to a behavior stat sheet. All right. Hebrews 9:14. Hebrews 9:14 identifies a faculty where the construct lives, the conscience, co-knowing faculty, and announces that the blood of Christ purges it completely, not partially, not provisionally, but permanently. And science, so we're putting it all together now. Science confirms the architecture Paul was describing 2,000 years ago. Predictive processing. The simulation Paul calls conformity to this world. Predictive processing. Constructive memory equals why no more remembrance is a cognitive directive. Constructive memory equals why no more remembrance is a cognitive directive. Cognitive dissonance equals why identity must precede behavior and not follow it. Observer effect, why the purge conscience changes what you collapse into reality. Bayesian inference, why metonia is a total prior replacement, not a moral improvement. I'm pretty sure that word is the root of repentance, to literally have an afterthought. An afterthought that totally changes my mind because of the realization of its truth. So, the virtual construct is real. It generates real outputs: anxiety, dead works, religious performance, shame spiral, self-imposed law, new wine. Self-imposed law is real. It is not imaginary. It is a running program that with genuine consequences, but it is not the truth. The truth is you have been made the righteousness of God. 2 Corinthians 5:21. The construct was crucified. Romans 6:6. Aorist tense. Done. The construct was crucified. It was done. The conscience has been purged. Hebrews 9:14. The renovation is already underway. Romans 12:2. And so now the only question left is whether the epikenosis, the full recognized experiential knowledge, revelatory knowledge you learn through experience of that reality, has hit the threshold. So yeah, this might be a record for the longest podcast I've done. I wasn't able to do it through 11 labs, too long, and I actually did it earlier, but my wonderful phone didn't record it. But I'm glad I got to redo it because I did it with a little bit more ad lib to it. Anyways, I hope you like it. I hope you can check out the language model at nu-wine.org. Just click on apps and you'll see some other things in there too. You just need to sign up, and y'all have a good one. Be blessed. Bye.